My background's a working life in the clothing industry before becoming a teacher of clothing within TAFE, and then working through TAFE and coming to university as a researcher. The reason I went to university as a researcher was to understand how people learn through work, because in a job I had before I went to university it was important to understand how people learn through everyday work activity, because so many industry sectors in Queensland don't actually have formalised educational provisions. So a question I thought was interesting was, how come these people develop the kind of skills they have to do the kind of work they do, some of which is complex and demanding, and of the kind that's normally associated with outcomes associated with participating in educational programs. So that was the key motivation that brings me here.
You're now, I can say it, prolific in your field. You're in amongst people who are significantly both researching and influencing policy. You're part of many networks, I'm sure. Tell us what a good network is, or what's a useful network to someone in your situation, a senior scholar. How could a network be helpful, or what have been some networks you've been part of that have been helpful?
Sure, there are often networks where there's shared respect, collaboration in the terms of working together, sharing a load, and working on issues which are relevant to the members. And that keeps the energy going along, because we're all engaged in far too busy lives and working lives. And so it's finding that impetus within others, both nationally and internationally, that will maintain that impetus of your interests, and in sharing and working with other people that you have trust in, you respect, and can labour together in the work.
So would I be right in saying that for some researchers they're not wanting more work, for others they're wanting more resources to support their work, rather than bigger and increased numbers of grants?
Yes, I guess it plays out differently for different folk. One of the issues of having a profile is that you probably get a lot of invitations to review articles, to contribute to this. And it's important in some sense you keep up that retinue of work. But at the same time, the workload increases and you have to become selective about what you engage with. But I guess some of us are pretty bad at being selective and want to sort of maintain many fronts and many areas of activities.
How could Eidos then work with busy senior scholars, add value, but not become another thing they have to do, be engaged in yet another network? How could Eidos add value to that individual researcher?
I guess trying to align the activities which Eidos is asking folk to be involved with those interests and values that are central to the individual, and what they will want to prioritise in terms of their values and energies.
My last question is, do we need to be more politically influential in your mind as education, training, learning researchers?
Yes, but in the right ways.
Explain that.
Well, it's one thing to have a presence and one thing to have an engagement, but I think the engagement has to be on a basis which is not trading off important things, important values, to simply have that engagement, to be permitted to engage, and that to be allowed to have independence in making your point, and not an engagement compromising you making your point. I mean, if you consider that, perhaps the public sector is increasingly politicised and incapable of an independent voice, that one of the few independent voices out there are independent researchers. And increasingly with universities demanding that folks engage with corporate and government agencies to secure funding, there's a very delicate balance that has to be undertaken to ensure the integrity of one's work and one's independence as a researcher.